The two things that we're going to tackle, hopefully, today is an overview of adult education classes, and all of the teachers slash facilitators of the classes are here, and they're going to give a little bit of an overview and try to help you not only understand what their class is about, but also to invite you to participate. And I think that's where we're going to start, and then about 9:45 we should be done with that, and then we'll spend the rest of the time talking about a proposed building program that we have been doing some thinking about, and I'm going to give you some updates on that and where we are and where we believe we need to go. Okay? So that's our game plan. In your bulletin, every week for the last probably 4 weeks anyway, you have seen regularly a list of adult education classes. And there are 5 classes that will be offered each Sunday morning from 9:15 to 10:15. And we're going to take it in the order in which they are in the bulletin. So Faith Link will be first, and Norm is here. The most good we can do, Darren, life transitions, Tim Tuthill, parenting, Shara Evie, and Disciple 3, Bible study, Pigeon Hundley. So we'll do those 5, and then I'll talk about my class on Sunday nights, and then Joan will follow it up with a disciple that will be offered on Wednesday nights. Okay? So Norm, you're on.
I guess one small correction. You've been reading that there is the Faith Link class is informal, and there's no reading and preparation. You don't get a book that goes for 13 weeks. What you get is on Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday, something by email. It has a few pages of a current topic. So it's a way of taking current events, current topics in the news, and connecting them with our faith journey. And just as give you an example of some of the things that have been done last year. One was the reasons people are stateless or are without state identification. It had to do with immigration, refugees. Another one that dealt with sexual harassment and assault, which is still a current topic. The teacher protests of last year, September, and our faith. And one of the particular elements of that was looking at one's budget as a moral document. In other words, how you make your budget for state or for a person individually says something about your things that are important for you, and those are moral statements. So 50 years of Mr. Rogers is the one that's coming up this next week. So you're welcome. There's no book to buy. You just simply put your name on the list and get the materials the week before. Okay. Look forward to seeing you.
So there's some handouts that kind of go along with what I'm about to say here. They're making their way over in the very back. There's 2 documents related to this class that I am teaching. It's called The Most Good You Can Do. The first document is the course syllabus that provides a description of the 24-week class. The titles that are in italics are the books that I will be drawing upon in my weekly lectures. You'll find pictures of the covers of these 14 books at the bottom of the second page. So those are the covers of the books that I'm going to cover. The books are current, so most are written within the last 10 years, and all are written by thought leaders in their field. The overall concept that underlies the course is the concept of doing the most good you can do, which is this book. So this is by Peter Singer. After listening to this book on the way to work, I decided to design a class around it. We're going to examine our outreach efforts from this lens to determine if we are doing the most good that we can for those that we are trying to help. I've designed the course from scratch and have developed presentations for each week that will have the feel of a college lecture. Please feel free to invite friends, as it's important to me that this is a very approachable class. There's not going to be any icebreakers, no group discussions or group work. I'm not going to call on anybody, but there will be a time saved at the end of each lecture for class members to share their reactions if they would like. So in short, if you would like to come to the class and just listen, that's totally fine. It's important to me also that you understand that I do not expect you to read these books. I will only be highlighting a few key points that each author makes. I would like for you to approach the lecture as a book review, so that after the lecture, if you like what you've heard, you think that sounds interesting, then you can read the book on your own time. So now let's go to the next page, which is the food pantry menu. I wanted to provide you with a preview of one of the topics that we will cover in the class, so that you get a feel. The second document is the menu, like I said, and it was for our FUMC-sponsored food distribution in August. The Feeding America distribution is held on the second Saturday of each month at Cesar Chavez. There's approximately 75 families that show up, nearly all are Hispanic, that benefit from the distribution. FUMC pays for 5,000 pounds of food and provides the volunteers for these 3 distributions that we pay for each year. The cost is $495 each time. I know that's a little hard to see, but the menu includes very little variety. Feeding America is a great organization, however, it is, in my opinion, ineffective for mobile food distributions. Due to the size of Feeding America and the significant number of food distributions that are being held throughout the community, Feeding America chooses the food that will go on the truck based on what is available in the warehouse with the goal of hitting 5,000 pounds. A few observations that I have made during these distributions are that Feeding America is focused on hitting the 5,000 pounds of food target and not on variety. It's nearly impossible to make an actual meal out of the food that is provided in the distribution. The clients have no say in the food that is loaded onto the truck. I would think that a food distribution that is targeted to a population that is 95% Hispanic would look different than the food distributed in other neighborhoods, but it does not. Kellogg's is a great sponsor of Feeding America, but we always have more Pop-Tarts than we know what to do with. 181 pounds of Pop-Tarts is way too many Pop-Tarts, and I don't think that a Pop-Tart has much nutritional content. The assorted bakery line item, coming in at 638 pounds, is a complete waste. If you turn the page over, you will see 2 pictures of the bakery items that were included on the truck. The bakery items filled an entire table the length of the cafeteria. The bakery items were not loaves of bread, they are cakes, pies, and cupcakes, among other sweets. In my opinion, the Feeding America food distribution method of charity is not effective. I would go as far as to argue that not only is it not effective, it actually hurts those we are trying to help. It is toxic. So, what can we do about it? You will have to attend the class to find out.
Good morning. My class piggybacks off what Bob was talking about last week, in that there are many, many transitions that we go through each and every day, and we tend to look at the big ones, maybe loss of job or saying goodbye to your home of 40 or 50 years, but we tend to overlook or minimize the need to process through our grief and loss. And so what I'm going to do in my class is highlight different biblical transitions, and certainly the way that Jesus managed transitions, and then highlight through maybe a model that we can all work on through our different transitions that we're going through. Some big, some small, no matter what, they all add up, and they all are important to look at through this lens. So that's what we'll be doing, and of course we'll be talking through our own transitions that we've gone through in life. and talk about the importance of grieving and mourning, as well as welcoming the change that is to come or that is present. Some of us decide that, well, we're not going to welcome this change, and we will drag our feet and put our heels in the ground because we will not face this change that is reality, what we are looking at each and every day. So join me for the class, and certainly it will be more of a dialogue and conversation. You can drop in wherever you are in your journey and find a place, so it won't build on week to week, but instead it'll be more of a conversation and for you to think through with places and spaces for silence and processing your own transitions that you're going through. All right? That's it. Next.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm going to be facilitating a 4-week parenting class. This is going to be a drop-in style video-based class. And so every class will take 10 to 15 minutes in the beginning of class to watch a video, and then we'll discuss it. So the topics that I chose are interesting to parents, caregivers, as well as kids. And so week 1, we'll be watching a short documentary that highlights the education system in Finland. And we'll kind of contrast and compare how our school system is different, how it's similar. And then week 2, the name of the film is called The Land, which is actually an alternative playground where kids are encouraged to take risks and be creative. And it somewhat challenges helicopter parenting style. So that'll be interesting. And then weeks 3 and 4 will actually focus on technology and our kids. So we're taking 2 weeks because it's such a broad topic. And lots of videos on that to choose from. So we'll be meeting in the chapel at 9:15 starting next week. And there is no preparation, there's no homework, no book or anything like that, so just drop in.
Good morning. Good morning. All good classes, aren't they? I should take the parenting class to see how to get along with my granddaughter. Who, a couple weeks ago on her birthday, I called her and she was gabbing away to me and talking, and then a few minutes later Bob called her and she said, I'm not going to talk to you, Grandpa, I'm shy. So then he called me and said he was going to spend her college fund. I think we better come to that class. Anyway, I'm here to talk about Disciple 3, and this is a disciple, what they call disciple fast track, so its intent is to be covered within a Sunday school period. So it's the same style of disciple, but it's meant to be able to cover the material in a Sunday school format. So there is preparation for the class. It's a 24-week class, 12 weeks on the prophets in the Old Testament and 12 weeks in the New Testament, covering the letters of Paul. So if you're interested and have taken a disciple Bible study class in the past, you'll kind of be familiar with the format of it. There is required reading. I do, however, tell people that they can use whatever Bible they wish because we like the variety of different types of Bibles, and also to get people's interpretation of what they're comfortable with using their own Bible. So any type of Bible you want to use is okay with me because we like to share different interpretations. So like I say, this will be a 24-week study. If there are classes that you miss, that's fine, but it's really important that you come because it's a continual study, as most people know. And I like the type of class where I facilitate the class, but that there is participation. So if you come, I do expect that and like that, and I think you get more out of it if you actually read the material and come and participate. So any questions on Disciple 3? I am requiring that you the people who take the class have taken a Disciple 1 or a Disciple 2 in the past at any time. It doesn't matter when you took it, but that would be the only prerequisite. Elaine, did you? It's on Sunday mornings during Sunday school time, 9:15. Okay, and I think Audrey has ordered some of the books, and they're in 2 thumbs up. So if you need a book, see Audrey, she'll order it for you. And actually there's 2 books, one for the old, one for the new, but each one a 12-week session. Any other questions about that?
This summer, when we were doing our traveling, one of the places that we went was Niagara on the Lake, where they were actually doing a C.S. Lewis play, and we got a chance to attend. So as we were walking around town, we went into a bookstore, and I found a book by C.S. Lewis called Reflections and Essays on How to Pray. I started reading it, and I was taken by not only the questions that he was asking, but also the way in which he was engaging the thought process to think differently about praying. So here are the questions from the book. Each one is a chapter. We're going to take in the class on Sunday night. Okay, Sunday night, 5:30 to 7. We'll take 3 chapters each week. And here are a sampling of the questions. How can prayer be proven to work? Why make requests of God if God already knows what we need? Do our prayers depend on how deeply we feel or mean them? Isn't it presumptuous for us to bring our concerns before God? How does prayer fit with the idea of God's providence? Are we asking for miracles when we pray? Does prayer require morbid introspection of our sins? What are tips for avoiding God and prayer altogether? How does prayer become a regular practice? How can we get out of our own way to pray? How do we make sure it is the real I who stands before the real thou in prayer? How can we be like David and pray with delight? Great topics. So if you are interested in deepening your own prayer life and your own prayer understanding, then this is not a Sunday morning class, this is a Sunday night class. So 5:30 to 7, the books are already in. So if you want to join with us, please pick up a book and get reading, because we're starting next Sunday night. Okay? Joan.
Well, if you want to take Pigeon's very compelling class, you have to take mine. I'll be teaching Disciple 1 on Wednesday evenings, 6 to 7:30. It's the fast track version. Many of the details are what Pigeon already said. In Disciple 1, we'll deal with kind of 2 main topics, if you will, which are how to read the Bible and then kind of what to do with that. How does that interact with our real lives? And these 2 topics are pretty crucial. Whether you've already read through the Bible a bunch of times or if you've never read it before, talking about that in community can be really powerful. Just this past weekend, I was talking to a friend of mine who said that as a kid, she had come across the verse just out of context in Matthew that says, "Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect." And then for the rest of her life, since that was in 2nd grade, she said, And for the rest of her life, she's struggled with like pretty major perfectionist tendencies. So if you can discuss then those things in community and then give the context, then it can be really helpful then to figure out different and more helpful ways for the text to interact with your life.
Thank you. So you hear just how vast our class offerings are. We have been working on this for some time. We offer it to you to not only be engaged, but to really enter into a growth-filled process. And that's what adult Christian education is designed to be. It's a way to help you continue your lifelong learning. And so I commend that to you. It all begins next Sunday. So next Sunday, the 30th, is when all of these Sunday morning classes kick off, and then Sunday night, and then the following Wednesday. So, questions from anybody? Yes.
I'm not able to attend the How to Pray class, but I'm really interested in the book. Are they available to check out
Sure. Well, not check out.
or borrow?
Your mom can buy it for you. Any other? All right. Thank you, facilitators, teachers, for being here this morning and for sharing that overview. What I want to do now is to switch gears and talk a little bit about where we have been going the last several years. When I first came to First Church, there had been for some time a vision group. But just before, probably a year maybe before I came, they had sort of disbanded. And so we believed that we needed to re-up that vision group and begin thinking about our future. Meaning that churches are always needing to reinvent themselves. It is just a given. Because what happens in history of a church may not be the future of a church. It served a role and a responsibility in that time and the place for whatever program was part of the culture of that congregation. But it may not meet the future needs because people change. Opportunities change. Demographics of the church change. There are all sorts of changes that are just normative in the ebb and flow of a congregation. So congregations need to continue to reinvent themselves. And the way to do that is to begin working, and I mean that seriously. It is hard work to put on a lens and see 10 to 20 years out and set the framework now for what the congregation's going to be and what they're moving to be over this continuum of growth. And so we began the work of visioning, and we came up with a strategic plan. It was a plan that we put in the context of needing to have 6 critical success factors. They are the things that we believe are essential for this congregation, built on the past, but moving more decisively toward the future. And so our first critical success factor was worship. We need to be successful in worship. I don't know whether you realize it or not, we have been growing in our worship attendance. There has been more energy in both services, particularly this year. The music, the preaching, the liturgy, time adjustment. One of the outgrowths of the vision process was to re-enter that two service where it was 8:15 and 10:45 with Sunday school as a designated hour between the two. They had tried putting Sunday school at the same time as the first service, and what we saw was that the casualty was adult Christian education. And so we didn't feel that that was worthwhile for the future of the church. And so we split them out again. And we're doing very, very well in worship. Second critical success factor is congregational care. Now, what in old terminology, typically what that means is pastoral care. And pastoral care, while it is delivered by the pastors and the staff, is not community-based. It's not community-focused. It's not people learning how to care and respond and interact with each other as a means of care. And so we have been retooling and reimagining congregational care. Tim Tuthill, our associate pastor, is overseeing the whole ministry of congregational care, of which now our outreach to the Clark community also comes under that umbrella of congregational care. We have Stephen ministers. We have congregational care assistants. There are 8 to 10 congregational care assistants, people who have said that they feel a call and a passion for doing visitation. And so each week, assignments are made for lay people to go out and visit, either in the hospital or shut-ins or wherever the need is, and we're trying to be responsive. But it is a congregational emphasis, not just a pastor emphasis. Okay? So that's important. So congregational care. Worship, congregational care. Spiritual formation or discipleship. That's what you've been hearing about this morning. Audrey Cavell is our director of that ministry. She not only oversees the children's area and the children's ministry, but she also oversees and works to facilitate the classes that we just rehearsed for you. And spiritual growth is a challenge for all of us. And we need to take it seriously enough to engage privately, but also in the context of sharing with one another. So discipleship and spiritual growth. Then we have outreach and mission. Joan has that portfolio under her care and leadership, but one of the outgrowths of outreach and mission is the class that Darren is offering over this next year, and that is to help our congregation not only understand who we are, what we're called to do, who we are currently ministering to, but who we need to minister to as the demographics of downtown shifts. So that's really, really crucial. And under that umbrella is not only social justice ministries, but also mission as it relates to other places around the world. Okay? I knew I'd do this. The fifth one, what is it? Oh, hospitality. Sammy does the work of hospitality. She works with a team. The fellowship meals that we have, the way in which we are working to greet and make this church very welcoming when you come. All of that is under the heading of hospitality. And then there is administration, which takes into consideration our finances, our building, and personnel management. So those are the things that we believe we must be successful in. And so every newsletter, it's organized in those 6 critical success factors. Everything you get, if you read, if you happened to come last year in the fall to our annual church conference, this is a marvelous document that even if you didn't come, you ought to have it in order to read, to see what the scope of ministry is in and through this place. It's terrific what we're doing as a community. So all of that actually came out of the visionary process and the development of those 6 critical success factors. One of the things that we learned, and we did it conversationally. We invited people together to gather and to give feedback regularly. And one of the things that we learned as we were doing those listening sessions was that the building, as it says, was actually hampering some of the vision possibilities of our congregation. Now that stands to reason. Okay? When was the church built? I mean, the physical facility. It was built in 1916. It was dedicated in 1916. It is a marvelous sanctuary. But getting to the sanctuary is a problem for people who have mobility issues. And if you don't believe that, you should come and stand with me either at the front, the beginning of worship, or the end of worship to watch people struggle with what is now doom. It's called the Hall of Doom.
We will also accept Tunnel of Terror.
Yeah, that one too. I actually know from experience because back when I was in senior high, I always had to leave from Sunday school to come down to pick up Mary Longstrap from Carter, where she came by bus, and transport her through that hallway and up that hill. That took a lot. Especially going down it takes a lot out of you.
Yeah. And so probably the very first thing that we set as a goal is to try to address handicapper accessibility. That has not changed. That is our primary goal. A welcoming main entrance was a second goal. Children and nursery and classroom space, to upgrade that so that particularly families who have young children, it's not optimal to have the nursery and the children's area on the far north of the building, when in fact we're all in worship at the south end of worship. And you have to navigate, you have to learn to navigate really well in order to even get back there without walking through the sanctuary in order to do that. It's complicated. Plus, you have issues around safety for children. We all know that we live in a pretty violent society. I mean, how many times this past week did you read about shooters or someone even in a daycare where the children and parents were stabbed in a daycare? And so we have to be conscientious about the safety for our children. And so that is a major concern for the building committee. The improved worship space, the chancel is not handicap or accessible. And that is very, very difficult. We need to have some different way of accessing the chancel area besides just stairs. We have people who love to sing and have loved to sing and who participate in the choir if they could get to the choir loft, but they cannot right now. So those are the things that weigh on us. We have parking challenges because we're landlocked. We made a decision to stay here many years ago. The congregation made the decision to stay, and that's a good decision. But what it makes is for difficulties in areas like adjusting accessibility and doing those things, doing a parking facility so that we can have that easily accessible. And then the final goal is to have a community outreach hub with flexible space. Those have been the overriding goals. Now, in order to get to a building committee, you have to go through steps. We are Methodists, for example. There are steps. That's just the way it is. And so the Board of Trustees had to do an assessment of the building. And they did an incredible job with assessing. It was a book. Was it bigger than that? Yeah. Bill was the chair of the trustees at the time. Steve is currently the chair of the trustees. And that assessment not only told where there are problems, but what kind of dollars we're going to need to spend over the next 10 to 15 years to just simply keep it at the stage that it currently is in. Okay? So there has been enormous work gone into all of this. The trustees got to the end of their evaluation and they said, we've done as much as we can do. We'll process and product and see where we need to go with our building. And so the church conference, about 2 years ago now, it will be 2 years in November, named a building committee. And we took time to evaluate how we need to build that committee and what the components are of the committee, what representation needs to be on the committee. And they have been working diligently. I mean, monthly, they have been meeting for at least an hour and a half every month for nearly 2 years. Sometimes more. And so what they did was that they worked with an architect, and that architect took all of these goals that I just listed out, were our priorities, and they began trying to imagine what a campus would look like over the next 25 years. And that 25-year game plan is pretty aggressive. But it's also something in which we focused on particularly accessibility, a welcoming main entrance, and children's area. children and education area. So if you have been attentive, if you came to any of the information sessions this past spring and into the summer, if you've looked online at the overview of the proposed concept drawings that the architect did, you will have seen what the result of that conversation with the architects was. After folks got acquainted with it, we had listening sessions again. And there were 12 listening sessions. And feedback came. And the overriding feedback was that it looked differently than what they had wanted it to look like. It was not consistent with the classic look of the stone and the historic look of the church, because it was kind of wrapped on this side, on the west side, in glass. So one of the main things was that the feedback was they wanted a different look. Second thing was that they felt that it was too aggressive, monetarily. The first pass was that it was going to be somewhere between $8 and $10 million. And so what the building committee did, as soon as I returned from the renewal league, we met together. We met first with the trustees. I've been listening to the staff and their reflections of what they're hearing. And then the building committee came together and we listened to one another. We talked with one another very honestly and openly. And we decided that what we really need to do is to go back to the drawing board. That the plan as it had been developed was not meeting the needs. And so we decided that what our goal is to cut that initial price tag about in half. That's number one. Number two, to try to do what we do within the current footprint of the building without moving walls or destroying the exterior. Now that's a challenge. That's a challenge. But the architects believe they can come up with a plan that we will begin working with. So the process is that, number one, we have heard the congregation, and we're listening to the congregation, and we're doing adjusting based on what we're hearing. And you need to hear that. The other thing that I want to say is one thing that I am hearing that I want to challenge. Is that somehow in the minds of folks, there is a differentiation that's happening between ministry to our culture and our community versus what they understand to be ministry to us. And so what's happening is that there is a possibility, I think, that if we don't address that philosophical, theological differentiation, we're going to be perhaps inviting some conflict internally. And I don't want that. So I would rather deal with it straight up and make sure that we are all attempting to see. I believe that I've been in pastoral ministry now 38 years. One of the things that is happening it's just a dynamic of our culture, is that we are having a hard time understanding the whole identity in the church of an intergenerational congregation. That says, older people are just as valued and valuable as younger people. And people in the middle, the middlers, are just as valuable as either the young families and young people or the older people. We've got to understand that our ministry to some of our older, very committed, wonderful congregation members who have been devoted to this church, many of them most of their lives, are having mobility issues that we need to listen to, we need to respond to in positive ways that can assist them in their fullest participation in the life of the congregation as possible. So it is really ministry to us all that we're looking at this. What we're trying to do is to be sensitive to it all. It's hard to do, to meet all the possibilities and the criteria of the different ages and stages in the congregation. But I really mean it. We are trying, and we are listening, and we are working to do that work, including, and this is something that we are talking about very carefully. We're taking a look even at First Place to reimagine some of the space in First Place to do more outreach, to designate some of those spaces as more outreach. Probably the most accessible room in the entire church is the youth floor in the lower level of First Place. We started thinking outside the box in the last 2 months about what would it look like? What would it look like if that space were reimagined to not only be for the youth, but be for the work program on Tuesday mornings, to be for gatherings of community people, to be an outreach to our Heartside neighbors during the week, not just on Tuesday mornings. So there are lots and lots of ways that the building committee is doing incredibly important work in your behalf. And what I wanted to do is to give you an update that number one, we're hearing, number two, we're adjusting, and number three, stay tuned. Because it's not, okay? Questions? Doug?
With mine right now, during how we had during the week with the school, would they be moved to a different area, or?
We would either move them to a different area, or we would potentially just not renew the contract for them to continue. There is, for the context of Doug's question, is that in that lower level there is a Grand Rapids
Called KVO.
called KVO. What's it stand for?
Vocational.
Kent Vocation.
Community vocation.
Okay, Kent Community Vocation.
Wow. That's
Whatever.
what it is.
Okay. They have been in that space for a number of years. But if it's ministry versus income, that income is not a lot. And we could easily rethink that. What else? Questions? Comments? Come on, folks. This is a hot button topic. Let's go. Give me your comments. Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a comment. I work with Circles of Grand Rapids, and we're a poverty initiative helping people move out of poverty. And I can speak for people that work with those groups. We need places to meet that are accessible, that are comfortable. We're meeting at Trinity right now, and it's not air conditioned, and I can tell you, nobody's happy. It's miserable. We've been miserable on Monday nights. And we need kitchen space. So there's need for good quality space that's cheap or free for outreach ministries, because we don't have much of a budget. We operate on a shoestring. So improvement in building and accessible and easy to access, and where kids can be. We have 4 classes of kids, plus the adults, we have kitchen, we have dinner. We need lots of space. And I would just say any improvement that the church can make to give and to be generous in using that space would be appreciated, not just from my organization, but from lots of the groups.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I think maybe people don't realize either, a lot of people don't realize, is the confinement of space when you have a funeral, and how difficult it is for the funeral directors to move a casket in and out of our facilities. And the elevator is not big enough to access a casket or to have, I don't know how many people fit in that elevator, I'll never fit in it, so. I'm just saying that I don't think everything is realized in other things that happen within the church on a continual basis that needs revamping. And that just made me think of that, of the funeral.
And her comment made me think of that too, because one of the things that folks who attend funerals see the fruit of the funeral, like when we get into the funeral itself, but they don't understand what it takes to get to that place. And what Pigeon was highlighting was the struggle that funeral directors have with our building. They have to back up the hearse here to Barclay and then come up the stairs and then up the stairs and then turn. They cannot even come in the north lobby area because the casket cannot turn around this knob and the stairs that are here. So it really is a very difficult thing. When we were in a building program in my former church, the one requirement, it was a requirement for the size of the elevator. I said to the architect, it has to be able to hold a casket and it has to be able to hold a grand piano. And they did it. They did it. Fritz?
Well, just for that, Mark can talk to the whole matter of EMT accessibility.
Yeah.
How many buildings have health care offices when you can't fit a stretcher laying down in an elevator? So think about that. An emergency is we have to break down our stretcher, make people sit up that can't sit up to get in an elevator. And I think that should be a nationwide thing of access. But our church is, I don't know how big the elevator is.
I mean, we can't even get the cables.
Right.
And then to bring up outside, we have to carry them up the steps, around that curve, and then out the door and down the steps again. And that cart we use for them, that's not that light either.
No. Wow. And the stretchers, to move somebody from one of these upper rooms, you got to put them in a stair chair. Somebody who can't lay down or can't sit up. then you're moving.
Right.
And those structures weigh now 130 pounds themselves.
So Mark is an EMT, and he's saying that the challenges in the facility as it sits are enormous. Yes?
So if you don't know me, I grew up in this church, and when I first heard about the program, my first initial emotional nostalgic reaction was, oh no, things are going to change. And I know many of you have been in the church longer than I have, and so maybe that nostalgia is even stronger. But I just want to say how encouraged I am by all of these initiatives and all of these plans, because if we are calling ourselves a church community, but the space that we're providing is beautiful but inaccessible, then we're not really doing the job that we're committing ourselves to do. So I am incredibly encouraged and very excited about the changes that are coming.
Thank you.
You're here.
Thank you.
I agree with her.
Gretchen?
Two questions. What is the timeline? And then secondly, as far as budgeting, are there grants and other things to be able to supplement, to do some of the things, some of the extra ministry things and whatnot, to stretch what we have to do more things?
Yeah. Timeline. I'm going to be pleased as punch if we can have at least a drawing to us to think about and do some more conversing with one another by early spring. Kurt Kimball, who is not here to defend himself, Kurt believes that we need to go faster than that. I do not believe we need to go faster than that. I think we've got to be doing it right. Plus, I believe that we need to cycle through the decision of the Greater Church in February to see what that decision is, as well as if there are any ramifications to us in our ministry. So, in the book of discipline, what we have to do is that we have to bring to the congregation concept drawings. And the concept drawings have to be at least approved enough to give the building committee enough latitude and affirmation to then go into further exploration to get to potential bidding process. And that means very specific drawings. So we have several steps before anything can even be, before we can go raise money, or before we can really say, yes, this is the direction we're going to go. We've got lots of deciding to do between now and then. As for grants, yes, I believe there are. But right now what we have is that we need somebody, and we have a few people in our congregation who are professional grant writers that may be able to help us in looking for those pockets where people are looking to invest in churches to do this kind of outreach and mission ministry, making historic churches handicap accessible. I mean, all of that is possible. We have not explored.
I know one thing, when we have IHN and we get those beds on the elevator, there's no room for anybody to be in there to go up with those beds.
Sure.
Once you put 3 beds in there, you almost have to be too big to be in there. So that's another thing we should look towards too.
Anybody else?
Did you talk about the church and building location, I couldn't name the denominational aspect of
Yeah.
involved in the conversation.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we're still United Methodist before I go through that. Okay, well, I appreciate your time, your attention this morning. Don't forget, classes begin next Sunday. And if you have things to share or feedback, building committee members are actually here today. Susan Bloss
Karen
is on the building committee. Bill, Karen, Shara. Oh, yes, Richard
Mosier.
All right, very good. Thank you.